Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving straight into a really fascinating piece of spoken word persuasion. We're going to objectively break down the exact theological arguments and the precise rhetorical steps used in a brief, highly passionate monologue from the Gospel Preaching Channel titled, God is Calling. You know, whether you're a student of theology, communications, or psychology, analyzing how a message is specifically structured to move an audience from total despair to complete renewal is just incredibly revealing. So let's map out exactly how this speaker constructs their argument, step by step.
Now think about most self-help advice out there for a second. Usually, you're told to put your best foot forward, right? To clean yourself up. But let's look at this provocative statement because it acts as the ultimate emotional hook for the speaker's entire message of transformation. Right out of the gate, the speaker doesn't ask the listener to minimize their flaws. Instead, they push them to embrace the absolute extreme. I'm the worst case you could ever come across. By inviting the audience to actively claim that title of the worst case, the speaker immediately removes the pressure of perfection. It's a brilliant rhetorical device because it instantly disarms you. You literally do not have to clean yourself up before approaching. Your absolute worst is exactly where this whole process begins.
So that brings us right into phase one, the need for fixing.
Okay, so every effective persuasive message hits a pain point. And here, the speaker identifies a really fundamental problem, a sinful situation that requires immediate divine intervention. They establish right away that the listener is in a state of disrepair that they just cannot resolve on their own. The premise is set. There's a problem, and a fix is mandatory. But what's absolutely brilliant here is how the speaker provides a literal script for the audience to recite. By giving the listener the exact words to say, "Lord, I have sinned, I made a mistake," the speaker establishes that initial step of verbal acknowledgement, while simultaneously removing the cognitive load of having to figure out how to ask for help. It completely lowers the barrier to entry. You don't have to formulate some grand, complex prayer. You just state the reality of your situation and directly ask for the fix.
Which leads perfectly into phase two, dropping the mask.
Before any of this divine fixing can actually happen, there's a huge psychological hurdle that has to be overcome: the natural human tendency to fake our spiritual state. The speaker insists that for Christ to commence working, you absolutely must strip away any pretense. And the repetition here is totally key. Don't come with a mask on, don't act, don't fake it. In the context of this monologue, performing goodness or pretending to have your life together isn't just unnecessary. Actually, it's actively detrimental to the process. The speaker is driving home the idea that divine intervention absolutely requires total transparency.
We can basically categorize this concept as spiritual authenticity. You have to approach entirely full of sins. You aren't supposed to magically empty yourself of your flaws before showing up. You are supposed to bring every single one of them to the table. The underlying logic is that you need to be perfectly genuine and honest with yourself in order for the process to even begin. This kind of deep vulnerability is framed as the absolute, mandatory gatekeeper for any divine change to occur. Honesty is quite literally the key that unlocks the door to the solution.
Once we've got that baseline of total authenticity locked in, the speaker shifts to phase three, the mechanism of grace.
So if you are the absolute worst-case scenario, you're going to need a pretty massive solution to handle that kind of weight, right? Well, the speaker brilliantly illustrates the concept of limitless grace by utilizing a microscopic measure, just a single drop of blood, to overpower a massive problem. By stating that just a drop can fix any sin or any mistake, the speaker is assuring the listener that the divine remedy is just overwhelmingly disproportionate to the human error.
The whole rhetorical strategy here intentionally shifts the focus completely away from the listener's overwhelming burden and places it squarely on the Messiah's effortless, absolute solution. Think about it. On one side of the equation, you have human mistakes, and no matter how terrible the worst case is, it's still ultimately finite. But on the other side, you have infinite divine capacity. The speaker systematically dismantles the listener's fear that they might be too far gone to ever be fixed.
But wait, this raises a really massive question, which the speaker actually anticipates perfectly. If the solution is absolute, totally effortless, and literally right there waiting, what actually prevents this transformation from happening right this second? If a single drop is all it takes, why on earth is anyone still living in a sinful situation?
And that brings us to phase four, the final barrier.
Okay, this is the absolute climax of the argument. After spending the entire first half of the monologue assuring the listener of this unstoppable divine power, the speaker executes a sudden, sharp pivot, placing the ultimate responsibility squarely back on the listener's shoulders. They emphasize that despite the immense power of the Messiah's blood, the final, completely impenetrable barrier to divine intervention is human free choice. Nothing except you. It is a striking paradox, really. The divine force that can wipe out any mistake with a single drop voluntarily hits the brakes at the boundary of human agency. The speaker makes it crystal clear. The Lord is willing to fix it, but he will not force the fix upon you.
The message is straightforward. It takes you to make that decision. When we synthesize the entire monologue, what we're really looking at is a highly actionable sequence of spiritual surrender. First, you've got to be genuine to yourself. Second, you approach without a mask and confess your current state. And third, you must actively choose for the Lord to fix you. The framework is incredibly structured. It takes a vast, abstract theological concept and turns it into a practical, step-by-step psychological process for the viewer to follow.
And that leads us right to the finish line. Phase 5, becoming a new creation.
Here is the resolution. And the speaker doesn't just promise a clean slate here, they promise a totally new existence. The initial, flawed state is directly contrasted with this ultimate promise. You completely leave behind the old person, the one who was full of sins, making mistakes, hiding behind a mask, and in exchange, simply by making that choice, you become the new creation, renewed, genuine, and changed for a better person. It's a complete binary shift, offering the ultimate payoff for all that deep vulnerability demanded in the earlier steps.
The monologue wraps up by dialing the urgency way, way up, painting a picture of the divine actively waiting for the listener to discard their old person. Just listen to the phrasing there. The Lord is awaiting this very moment. It makes the cosmic feel incredibly immediate. And the speaker provides one final, powerful script for the listener to internalize. I don't want to be that old person anymore. I want to be renewed by you. It is the ultimate call to action, pressing the listener to make the choice right now, because the solution is already on standby.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're really left with a fascinating dynamic to chew on. How does this rhetorical blueprint brilliantly balance supreme divine power against the weight of individual human agency to compel its audience? You know, these persuasive techniques are universally powerful because they tap into a core human desire for transformation, while simultaneously acknowledging our deep everyday imperfections. The speaker crafts a narrative where the listener is at once completely powerless to fix themselves, yet holds the absolute ultimate power to allow the fixing to even begin. It's a masterclass in tension and release. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack the fascinating structure behind this message. Keep questioning the structure of the messages around you, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.